Good afternoon, kiddos, or good evening, whatever it is for you when you're listening to this. I am about to read chapter 5 of The Enormous Egg. I hope everybody's well. And this is Grammy Kate, old Grammy Kate, reading to my grandkids and any other grandkids around there who would like to listen. Dr. Zemer arrived while we were still staring at the thing in the nest. He jumped out of his car and came running out to us in the backyard. He was wearing a red bathrobe over his pajamas. He looked pretty excited. He ran up to the nest and looked in. This is him running to see the egg. His eyes opened up wide, and he knelt down on the ground and stared and stared and stared. After a long while, he said softly, "That's it. By George, that's just what it is." Then he stared for another long time, and finally he shook his head and said, "It can't be true, but there it is." He got up off his knees and looked around at us. His eyes were sparkling. He was so excited. He put his hand on my shoulder and I could feel he was quivering. "An amazing thing has happened," he said in a kind of a whisper. "I don't know how to account for it. It must be some sort of freak biological mix-up that might happen once in 1,000 years. "But what is it?" I asked. Dr. Zemer turned and pointed a trembling finger at the nest. "Believe it or not, you people have hatched out a dinosaur." We just looked at him. "Sounds incredible, I know," he said. I can't explain it, but there it is. I've seen too many Triceratops skulls to be mistaken about this one." But how could it be a dinosaur?" Pop asked. "Goodness gracious," Mom spluttered, "and right here in our backyard. Doesn't seem hardly right. And on a Sunday, too." Cynthia was pretty interested by now and kept peeking into the nest and making faces the way she did when Pop brought a bowl of frog's legs into the kitchen one time. I guess girls just naturally don't like crawly things too much. Do you think that's true? To tell the truth, I don't either sometimes, but this thing that had just hatched out looked kind of cute to me. Maybe that was because I had taken care of the egg so long. I felt as if the little dinosaur was almost one of the family. We stood around for a long while looking at the strange new thing on the nest, trying to let the idea soak in that we had a dinosaur. After Dr. Zemer calmed down a little, he and Pop tightened up the chicken wire to make sure the little animal wasn't going to crawl out. Dr. Zemer watched the poor old hen for a time, and then he wondered if perhaps she ought not to be taken out before she went out of her mind. Pop figured that it might be a good idea, and he picked her up and put her outside the pen. She acted a little dazed at first, but pretty soon she followed the other hens and began scratching for worms like the rest of them. "I've never seen such a surprised hen in my life," Dr. Zemer said. Mom suddenly began to notice how we all looked. "Cynthia, you're still in your pajamas," she said. "You get right into the house and get dressed." "Walt, you've only shaved half your face. My goodness, the neighbors will think we're crazy. And we haven't had breakfast yet. What am I thinking of? Dr. Zemer, won't you stay and have breakfast with us?" Dr. Zemer said, "Why, yes, thank you very much." And then he happened to look at his bathrobe. "But I'm not dressed myself." "Oh, that's all right," Pop told him. "This is no time to worry about clothes. We always wear bathrobes when dinosaurs hatch." Dr. Zemer laughed and we all went back in the house. Mom got a big breakfast and we all tucked into the bacon and eggs and hot biscuits and honey as if we'd been starving. Afterwards, Dr. Zemer leaned back and patted his stomach. "I haven't had a breakfast like this in years," he said. "Those biscuits are worth coming miles for, Mrs. Twitchell." "You probably don't have a chance to eat a decent meal without being interrupted," Mom said. "A doctor's life must be terribly hard with emergency calls all the time, day and night." Dr. Zemer looked at her sort of surprised. "You know," he said, "I think you've got me in the wrong profession. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a paleontologist. My patients have all been dead for 50 million years or so." I saw him wink at Pop. Cynthia's mouth dropped open. 50 million, she said. "Say, what's a paleon? Well, whatever it is you said." Dr. Zemer looked at me. "Do you know, Nate?" "Well, no," I said, "not exactly." I could hear Cynthia snicker at me. "A paleontologist is someone who is interested in very ancient life," Dr. Zemer said. "He goes around trying to find old bones and fossil remains of plants and animals so he can know what kinds of things lived long ago. Actually, I should call myself a paleozoologist because I'm particularly interested in animal life, like dinosaurs, for example. That's why I was very anxious to see what came out of this egg, Nate's." "Well, I never," Mom said. "So that's why you thought the egg might hatch out." "I certainly hoped it would, anyway." Dr. Zemer said, "You see, all we've had to work on so far is fossils, just bones, teeth, footprints, and so forth. Naturally, we haven't been able to be sure about many things because up to today, nobody has ever seen a live dinosaur. As a matter of fact, no one was even sure that dinosaurs hatched out of eggs until Roy Chapman Andrews found some dinosaur eggs in the Gobi Desert in 1923. So you see, this dinosaur in your backyard here is tremendously important, and scientists all over the world are going to be grateful to Nate and his family for taking care of such a valuable egg." Dr. Zemer had been talking so much that he had forgotten about the biscuit he held in his hand, but now he broke it open and put a dab of butter on it. He looked around the kitchen and frowned a little. "This is such a nice, peaceful place, you know. But now the trouble begins. When the news gets around, the scientific world is going to go crazy. I'm afraid it may change things quite a bit around here. Science has done an enormous amount of good for the human race, but it rarely makes things any more peaceful. When I send a telegram to my colleagues at the National Museum saying that I have seen the first live Triceratops, they're going to take the first plane out of Washington, if they believe me, that is. Then there will be an official announcement to the press, and right after that, there will be crowds of scientists and other inquisitive people from all over, and there will be a big hullabaloo. It will make your quiet little backyard look like Union Station. People will be coming and going, stepping in your flower beds and leaving cigarette wrappers all around. I hate to upset your lives here like that way." Well, now, do we have to tell anybody that we've got a dinosaur? Mom said. I don't see why it's anybody's business but our own. Dr. Zemer smiled and shook his head. They'd find out anyway, Mrs. Twitchell, whether we told them or not. And besides, I owe it to my colleagues to tell them about anything I discover. I expect them to do the same for me. We scientists don't like to keep secrets from each other. We're just not made that way. We could send it away to a museum or a zoo, Cynthia said. Then all those crowds of paleo people could hang around the museum and they wouldn't bother us at all. Dr. Zemer looked around at me. How about it, Nate? Would you let your dinosaur go to a museum? I could take him to the National Museum in Washington where I work. I would promise to take the very best care of him. But I wouldn't get to see him then, I said. I don't think I'd like that too much. I'm not a scientist, but I'm kind of interested in him too. You don't get a chance to have a dinosaur of your own very often, you know. Well, I can't say I blame you, Nate, Dr. Zemer said, but I really feel that I have to tell the other scientists about this. What will we do? I tell you what, Pop said, I think Nate's got the right to keep the dinosaur if he went to all that trouble to hatch it out. And I guess the doctor has a responsibility to tell the world what he knows. So it looks as if Dr. Zemer had better go ahead and send his telegram, and the rest of us will brace ourselves for the shock as best we can. Maybe we can figure out some way to work it so that we won't be completely swamped. Now let me see, Dr. Zemer said, rubbing his chin. How would this be? We could make some rules about visiting hours, say from 8 in the morning until supper time or whatever you like, and then let in just a few people at a time to avoid crowding. Then there's the telephone. I don't know what you could do about that. That can be an awful nuisance if it rings all day and night. Oh, Mrs. Beebe can take care of that, Mom said. She can tell them to wait till morning if they call at night. She's very good at that. And I could answer the phone in the daytime, Cynthia said. I could be a kind of secretary. It would be fun. When the phone rang, I'd pick up the receiver and say, "Good morning. This is Mr. Twitchell's residence." And then I'd write down their names and all that. And it would be a very good experience for me, wouldn't it, Mom? And I could be the keeper, I said. I would say, "Step this way, ladies and gentlemen. Watch out for the petunias there, sir. This is the only living only living dinosaur in the world, and only known living dinosaur, Nate," Dr. Zemer said. "We must be scientific about this, of course." He turned to Cynthia. "All right then, young lady, here's your first job. Got a pencil and paper?" She grabbed the pencil and pad from the telephone box and sat down again. "All set," Dr. Zemer said. "I'd like you to send this wire collect to Alfred Kennedy, United States National Museum, Washington, D.C. He waited while Cynthia wrote this down, and then he said, "Have day-old Triceratops alive. Come quick. Signed, Zemer." He could see Cynthia was having quite a bit of trouble with Triceratops, so he spelled that out for her. Triceratops. Then he leaned back and chuckled to himself. "I wish I could see Kennedy's face when he reads that. Well, I must go back and get dressed. We'll probably have a few hours before things start popping. I'll come back after dinner, Nate, and we'll work up some sort of pen for that animal of yours, and we can give him a little food. Thank you all very much for the breakfast." When he had gone, Mom began bustling around. "Hurry up, Cynthia, and send off that telegram. Then, while you're doing the dishes, I'll straighten up upstairs. Nate, you better go out and milk the goat and then get washed and put on your good suit. We've only got 3/4 of an hour before church." Oh, do we have to go to church today, Mom? I said, I've got an awful lot to do for that dinosaur before people start coming to look at it. I should think we could skip church just this once when such an important thing has happened. Dr. Zemer said the scientific world is going to go crazy, didn't he? Never mind that, Mom said. There's no reason to give up going to church just because we've got a dinosaur out back. Get a move on now. And that is the end of that chapter. I think I might have missed a picture or two. I don't know if I showed you all them having their breakfast. Dr. Zemer with the biscuit in his hand. And there was also a picture of Cynthia ready to be a secretary. Now you have to remember, this was back in the 1950s that this was written. And people didn't expect girls to do many of the things that girls do nowadays. They did them then too, but nobody knew about it, I guess. So being a secretary wasn't the only thing that Cynthia could have aspired to do. But anyway, time keeps moving on and things change, often for the good, sometimes not so good. Anyway, I love you guys. Stay well, and I'll see you next time. Have a great, whatever it is, evening, night, or morning, or whenever. Bye.